I'm Jon Lentz, City and State's Managing Editor, and this is Last Look. I'm joined today by Michael Treanor, CEO of Nevele Investors. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem, John. Nice to see you.
Now, you're spearheading a project for a casino in the Catskills, one of a couple of projects, I think. Tell me a little bit about your project.
Sure. Well, we own the Nevele Resort in Ulster County in Ellenville, and which is actually kind of smack dab in the middle of the Hudson Valley. So I know people are wanting to characterize us as a Catskill casino, and that's historically fair. But we're 45 minutes from Poughkeepsie, New York, as well. So we purchased the property 2 years ago, and we've been actively working to get all the development approvals and the local consensus support for the project, and ultimately to be a successful bidder in any RFP for the state for license.
And the big question right now is that constitutional amendment. The legislature passed the required language 2 times, and now it's going up for a vote in November.
That's right.
How do you see that playing out?
Well, if you were to believe the polling, and I'm not sure that I do, but if you were to believe it, it's polling pretty strong in favor now. That can change, So I mean, we have another 5 weeks to go, and not seen much in the way of organized opposition, but that also could change. And so, we're trying to keep our finger on the pulse on a weekly basis on the polling. Polling data just came out from Siena, I think 55% positive. We've done our own private polling, which is kind of 52, 53-ish in favor. So there's a strong correlation between some of the Marist, Quinnipiac type polls and Siena polls and what we're seeing in our own private polling.
Now, one change I think recently that's been reported on is the constitutional amendment. The language included some positives from this, promoting job growth, increasing aid to schools, having lower property taxes. And I think that as a result of that, you've seen some increased support for it. Is that fair, you think, to include that language in this constitutional amendment?
Well, you're asking me to comment on something that I really have no control over, but I think putting resort gaming in its proper context is not a bad thing. I suppose you could argue both sides of that. The polling data suggests that the wording that was ultimately arrived at gets stronger results than perhaps a bland recitation of the amendment to the Constitution. But you'd have to talk to state government about that.
Now, you mentioned that there seems to be little action at this point. Do you expect opposition to come from any outside, out-of-state gaming interests, or do you think it'll just sort of slide through without much fanfare?
I'm not sure about slide through without much fanfare, but I'm not seeing, I can only speak for myself, I'm not seeing any meaningful organized opposition at this point, either from public interest groups or private concerns.
Now, there are a couple other projects in the Catskills. I think one near Grossinger's, one at the old Concord Hotel. Yep. People often talk about 3 projects in the Catskills, yours being one of them. And it really could be only at most 2
That's right.
that get project approval. How do you see yours stacking up against those others?
Yeah, the final legislation permits up to 2 in one of 3 designated upstate regions. Our company's view is that the Southern Tier Tioga region will get 1, that the Capital District will get 1, and that the Hudson Valley Catskill region will get 2. And my personal view is that the Monticello property will get a license. They've got a fabulous plan. They've been working on it quite hard. They're great guys, and it's going to be a really nice project over there. And we want to be the Hudson Valley property over in Ellenville, and I hope people say the same thing about us. We've got a great project, great support, and we put a lot of people to work.
And how much do you expect to spend in promoting this constitutional amendment?
That could vary because it'll depend on what happens over the next 5 weeks or so. But I would say $1 million is probably reasonable number.
And then what do you think about New York City being excluded, at least for 7 years, I think?
Well, I think that's shrewd on the part of the governor and state government because upstate New York really does need something to jumpstart it. And whereas I'm not sure that somebody who's visiting New York City is necessarily now going to go up to Tioga or Saratoga. They may, but to get them to go 90 minutes up to the Catskill Hudson Valley region is very achievable. And once you get them into upstate New York and start to revitalize that part of the state, I think that'll have a positive effect on all of upstate. So I think it's I'm very bullish on it.
Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, John. Thank you.
And that's it for Last Look. To check out other Last Look videos, go to our website, cityandstateny.com.